integration. This talk delves into the usability challenges faced by non-technical users when creating forms within WordChat and showcases one interactive approach to empowering all users, regardless of technical proficiency, to build powerful and engaging forms with ease.
Hi everyone. So the last two talks is a tough kind of run to follow, especially with a topic as exciting as forms. So I'll do my best to try and make it exciting. My name is Alfyn Parker. I'm a senior web developer at Buzz Interactive. I've been there for 4 years, not quite the lofty 16 or 17 years that they've been there. I started as a React developer in the company. Before that, I did 12 years of working in an academic context, so teaching courses such as computing for games, interaction design, and UX at both graduate and postgraduate. So the 4 years in industry have been a kind of a nice sort of shift. So what I'm going to show today is slightly less developer polished than the more content creation stuff. It's actually kind of our next focus, really, the thing that we wanted to look at next. And this is it's beyond prototypal. We have it in production in some sites, but there are definite improvements. And I'm kind of presenting it here today to see what the community thinks and whether it's it's worth taking it into a fully open source module or what changes to be made. So the agenda is first of all to focus on the UX challenges faced by non-technical users when creating forms. So that I kind of want to highlight the fact that it's all about content creators and non-technical users. It's not really about the developer experience, although we do get into a bit of how you might extend it later. So we'll start with the UX, then we'll move on to the UX goals and design principles, so how we kind of sat down and decided what to build. We'll build a prize draw form, so that'll be the exciting demo part. And then what I'd like to do is to showcase how to extend the module, how to create new inputs, new actions, and I think that's probably going to be, for this module, if it does become useful, it's one of those things where the extensibility is the important thing. How can we make sure that all the integrations are there? How can we make sure that all the rich kind of user experience in forms comes out of this system? And after that, we'll go on to future improvements and Q&A. So one of the things that we really focused on is how we can empower our users to really take agency over their content and their site. So everything that Nick has shown already gets our users really, really confident with building content in their system. But one thing we noticed is that after we've left them for a while with their sites, everything would go a bit quiet as they're kind of happy with the content. But as soon as something came up with a form, say it's just a simple change to the text in a button or an extra input, we'd get an email over asking us to edit the form and help them edit the form. So we figured that actually forms are just another piece of content, and they shouldn't really require a developer or intervention at all. They should be able to just go ahead and create quite rich forms without any intervention. So we started to ask ourselves, how can we empower all users, regardless of technical proficiency, to build powerful, engaging forms with ease? In order to really get to the bottom of this, we need to look at the current workflows for building forms in Orchard. And I think there's been some really interesting demos over the first course of this conference around how forms are created. And so the main steps are, first of all, you build the form, and then you process the form with the required responses and that sort of thing. When it comes to building forms, actually, this is very similar to our kind of page builder stuff. So you create a form widget, and then the user can slowly build up the various inputs that they want. So in terms of the whole form workflow, this is actually kind of the easiest part of it. But even at this point, we're kind of faced with terminology that doesn't really, isn't really relevant to our content creators world. We're looking at kind of egg types, anti-forgery, methods, actions, that sort of thing. Even the simplest things like what's the difference between a label and a placeholder, or names versus IDs. You know, they don't understand how a HTML form is kind of marked up and the inner workings of it. So they're not going to have that mapping that we have as developers to the attributes. And so you can get a reasonable form kind of crafted up quite quickly in Orchard. But once you have your form, the difficult bit for our users was when it came to workflows. Now we've seen already from Sitka's talk yesterday how powerful workflows can be. And actually that talk kind of opened my mind up to some of the stuff that you can do with version control with Elsa. And I can't wait as a developer to go back and kind of integrate all that stuff into our current projects. But this extra layer of complexity is something that our users just won't even attempt. So the first thing, when you build the form, you're in one type of UI and in one part of your CMS. And then as soon as you need to kind of do the business logic, you have to navigate to somewhere completely different and remember what you called all of your fields. You also need to know how it maps the fields that or the input fields that you've got to the object that's going to be processed in your workflows. These are complete blockers for our content creators. So once you get past the fact that you've navigated beyond your original UI, you then have to move on to the engineering concepts that are kind of intertwined with the workflows. So, you know, the first task you have to do is understand that this is going to be a HTTP request. Then you can move on to the fact that the bind form model isn't called during the workflow action. So you have to actually just add that. That's just something, a workaround that you just need to remember to do. Once you've done that, you can fork all of the fields and start validating them, which on a simple contact form is fine, but I've seen a few workarounds already in this conference where people are building their own their tasks to kind of get over the problem of this kind of expanding workflow. And so for us, if that's already a challenge for our content creators, it's a kind of no-no. And then we bring it back to, we join it, and then we validate the form as a whole to see kind of how everything played out. And in terms of kind of complicated validations, like min-max characters or min-max values for numbers, for numerical fields, you kind of, once you start getting those into your workflow as well, which this is the demo workflow from the documentation. Once you start having to add those as well, it can really balloon up. So yeah, ultimately, workflows are a really powerful tool, and you can achieve so much with workflows. And this system works great. We've got so many examples of this in production, where we've achieved lots of kind of knock-on effects or you know, triggers for other things, and really utilizing the power of workflows. But for our users, they're not accessible. So one of the things we really saw and really seek to kind of achieve is keeping the power of workflows, but not making it a critical part of the process. So hiding the workflow completely from our users if they want that. So how can we empower everyone, not just developers, to build powerful forms easily? When Nick and I sat down to sort of kind of work out this wicked problem, we first started with a set of principles. We do an innovation day at Buzz. We've got a biannual innovation day where we pick passion projects that we or issues that we kind of see in our day-to-day work tasks, and then we get to kind of scratch that itch and try and find a way to fix them. And so Nick and I in our innovation day sat down and set out a set of goals for how we wanted to achieve this. And the first one is that we really feel like consistency and familiarity throughout the entire content creator's user experience is critical. This shouldn't feel like a new thing to them. So, and also, I think we reviewed a lot of other ecosystems of CMSs. So the main one that will remain nameless, we looked at a lot of the plugins and how they kind of changed everything about the UI once you get into the form builder. They changed the colors, the branding, they kept their name on it. And it just serves to disorientate. Every time you go into a new view and there's a new type of branding or a new type of interaction model, the cognitive overhead, it kind of increases. So we were really excited to try and keep this as an Orchid core module which felt completely native. So we're kind of looking at sort of the kind of heuristics that Nielsen and Norman outlined quite a long time ago now, I think. We were keen to keep this sentence here. Users should not have to wonder whether different words, situations, or actions mean the same thing, follow platform and industry conventions. So with heuristic evaluations, it's kind of an expert evaluation where you can review UI and UX. And that's the fourth rule. So I think it's a really good one to build on. Most importantly, it's the accessibility for non-devs. So this notion that if you can create content, you should be able to create forms. Forms are just content. And we didn't want to have to explain to our users anything about HTML forms at all. You know, they really don't care. They see them as chunks of UI that they can piece together and compose forms with. So there should be no reason to understand HTML language at all. It's something that we have done mostly, but you'll still see that it's almost impossible to get away from these things. But you know, it's the best of intentions. So, and the final one, so one of my favourite parts of working with Orchid is the editors. We've already shown you a few of those that we've kind of overridden. And the power for me of editors is that you can turn a simple text field into like an emoji picker. If it can be saved as text, you can create really rich experiences for your content creators. So often we spend time thinking about what the actual end website will look like. We're not kind of building really lovely UI for our content creators. And so yeah, the editors, you know, they're an inspiration for me because I feel like they open up so many doors to kind of day-to-day development working with Orchid that I wanted to kind of get that flexibility into our forms. So we wanted that extensibility there, and also, as I said previously, workflows are still usable but optional, so we didn't really want to get away from that. So I'll quickly outline the solution as a whole, and then I'll go into the demo. So in order to keep the workflow, the power of workflows, but hide them from our user, what we've actually done is hoist the form widget settings to a global settings, which points to a single workflow, so like one true workflow that handles every single form that comes through our module. So once you've got that, you can then pull those settings from the global settings once you display your form, and that kind of gets rid of a load of settings already from our form widget. Secondly, we've tried to kind of keep everything in a single view. So we've got a single tab view where there's a bag part for building forms, a bag part for action, an area for response, and then all of the kind of override settings that you might want to do as a developer in the final tab. So if I go into the forms list, the first thing we'll do is just pop into so we'll pop into the form settings just so that it's clear where we are with these. So this probably seems completely familiar if you've worked with the Orchid forms. It's literally the exact same thing that we had before. But the idea of this is when we first deploy the slide, we can set this up. The user never really needs to know about it. And then we can go on with the rest of our our development. Once you've got the form set up, we can then look at the workflow. So, we did actually have to create a couple of tasks here, but overall I think it's quite a simple thing to look at, and if you needed to extend it in any way you could. It's just a simple workflow. So I think that's the critical thing. But also, if you didn't want to use this, we've given you overrides so that you can link other workflows to forms. So you're not locked into this one single workflow. It's just one for these generic forms if that's what you need. So as it happens at the moment, once you get your request, we've got a process form, and the process form is a loop for every single field. It goes and finds the correct handler for the input, and runs an initial task called process data, and a second task for validation on each of the forms. Collects any errors that come through and saves them to the model state. So it's a sort of catch-all for all inputs. If there's any issues, then we just redirect those errors back to the front end. Once we've done that, we've got a loop that goes through all of our actions. So it's a two-part thing. First you go through your inputs, and then once you've got through those successfully, you can go through your actions. And actions can be literally anything from HubSpot integration to saving the form object to the database as a content tag, things like that. And I'll talk about how we create those later. So once you've got those two things, the complexity of creating a new form becomes a lot simpler. All you need to do, and I don't think the UI is quite as polished as some of the stuff that Nick was showing yet. This is kind of early stage stuff. But in order to create the form, you've got 4 main sections. So here we've got the bag part, and again it's following the same conventions as previously. One of the design decisions here for us was that in the current Orchard setup, you've got when you're selecting your input type, you actually select like a text input, and then you go down and you drill down into email or it may be phone or number, that sort of thing. And it's actually quite quick to create inputs in this method. So we've gone on erring on the side of having lots of different inputs that take the decision making to a kind of single layer, rather than having our users having to drill down into stuff. So far, I think we've got an okay mix of inputs, but the idea might be that we have lots of eventually lots more interesting stuff. It's very quick to make rich UI. So, and then the actions at the moment are limited. This is part of what we're starting to work on now. We've got a HubSpot integration and an email notification. And I'm kind of working on a few more in the background. And we've got a confirmation area. This is what you can, how you respond to the user once everything's been processed. So currently, we've got show message, redirect content, and redirect URLs. Nick and I are in conversation at the moment about maybe not having this tab at all, because potentially the second tab, actions, could catch this as well, and be more flexible. I think currently there's lots of ways you might want to respond to a form. These three only do it in a partial way. This particular approach isn't that extensible either, because it's kind of hard coded, so this is kind of subject to change for us. And finally, if you wanted to, you could do away with the workflow that we've given as the global settings and start creating your own. So that's the kind of overview of the UI. I'll just create a form so I can show how it works. So name, require. So when you're creating an input, we've got the obvious stuff and then the advanced stuff, things that the user might care about eventually. But so in this particular,
selected text area.
Ah, I did as well. Thank you, Nick. Sorry, that's the text area. That isn't the one I was going for. Text here. Cool. So yeah, in the settings, you've got default values, placeholders, and the helper text, as you'd expect. So if I go through and make a prize draw form now, so email. So hopefully you can see that it's it's quick to create this sort of stuff. So we've still got the name there, which I think maps directly directly to the form attribute, which is a shame, but I think it's hard to get around some of these things. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add. So with this, I wanted to kind of show you some of the conditional stuff that we've been working on, some of the validation stuff that we've been working on. And so I thought there was a nice bit of trivia yesterday about the first commit that was done at Orchard for Orchard, sorry. So I thought we'd add that as the quiz. So we'll add a number field. We'll call it quiz. And when was the first recorded Orchard commit? And then if we add, the last thing I'm going to do is add the obligatory capture. And we've got the idea of form actions. We figured there might be more than one action that the forms might have. At the moment, we've just got to submit and a reset form action. So you've got a small cloud card there, you can add a number of buttons into your form. So we'll just have a submit. So if I publish that now, oh, this is letting in it. I think that's an ordering thing. I've got to keep these around. So that is, it's a small bug, a display bug. Cool. So no drama. Okay, so if I view that now, that's a kind of a minimum viable form. It's at the moment it's just sitting there as a kind of content item in just displaying how it should look. But I've created a small block, which isn't our standard thing for this form, but just for the demo. So I'm going to go and create a new page, which is added to. And we're just going to add the block, form blocks. So I threw this in yesterday for the demo, that's why it hasn't got a screenshot yet. And in this, we can go and select the prize draw, publish, and view. So here's our form now. This is our inner block in our website. So the next thing I want to do is show you how to process that form. I don't think that particular workflow changes things too much. It probably takes just about the same amount of time as the original stuff. But what I want to show you now is how we might email the user to tell them whether they got the answer right or they got the answer wrong. So we're going to add a notification action, and we'll call it success. We'll send it to myself. Actually, we won't send it to myself, we'll send it to them. So one of my kind of bugbears or issues with how things are done at the moment is that you actually have to remember the liquid that you would need. If the user was creating a form, they'd have to then create the response. Remember what the property was called, and also know the liquid kind of syntax to get that on their form. And so one of the things I wanted to work on, I don't think this is innovative, because I think it had it in Orchard 1, like a properties inspector type GUI for doing this sort of thing. But I was determined that I didn't want our users to have to do anything like that. So in this find helper drop-down, as we build in the form, in the context of the bank part, it's updating local storage with everything that's going on in the form, and then populating this drop-down. And then the user can simply just click on the field that they want and it populates a liquid. So it's a simple kind of nice to have that they can access that. My kind of aspiration for this is kind of maybe slightly more global. At the moment, its focus is only on the body of the HTML. So if I wanted to get any out of this liquid out onto the recipient in a minute, I'd normally just quickly put it in the body, copy it, or I'll copy it from the body to the recipient. So I think this makes sense to bring out as a more global thing that helps you with kind of these liquid syntax, in any way that you can add syntax. So I'm kind of thinking about extending that. So if I just grab the email and drop that up there. And this is the success. So, well, congratulations, let's make it a bit more interesting. And so, hi, name. So this is kind of the email for success, and then we've got these 3 tabs across here. The first one is our condition system. This allows you to select conditions based on the type of input that you've added. So in this particular instance, I'd like to use the number field, and so as I change that, the options in here change as well. So they match up to the fact that it's a numerical. If I popped over and did name, we only get the kind of string comparison stuff. So popping over there, I think it was 16 years ago. Was that the correct answer? Pop quiz. So we'll say 16. And so if it equals 16, then this particular email will go. We can also override the whole of the email settings in here if we wanted to, so the same sort of stuff you can do with the task. And then I'll add another email for here. Commiserations. I think that's how you spell it. I'll drop the name in there again. Cool. So now that's set up. I'll just make sure that I did that correctly. I'm worried about the conditions. Oh, I haven't closed it. Sorry, guys. I think there's a bug where if you close it too early, it clears the. Just going to go double check because I want the demo to work for a minute. That should be.
His name right there as well.
Thank you. In the fail,
Yeah.
name's not right. So there's number not equal to 60. I will just publish that and pop back. I know that's a bit tedious, but just to make sure. As I said, this is kind of where we're working towards. There are a few glitches here or there. So the condition for this one says number not equal. And that one says equals, and that's number. Cool. Okay. So now all we have to do is choose how we're going to respond, and then that should be the demo done. So all I'm going to do here is show a message saying, and hopefully we can go ahead and test our form. So if I submit this with an email that isn't, ooh, no. I'm just going to check the response because that didn't seem like the response here. So,
Is the response underneath that?
sorry?
Is the response underneath? Did you need to scroll down to see what it was coming back with?
Oh, yeah, actually that's probably, sorry. No.
Resubmit it again.
Sorry?
Resubmit it again.
I'll try this. Oh, yeah, no, the response is coming back. So, at this particular page, I could probably delete the top bit to make it a little bit more intuitive. I think, but as you can see, the workflow's kicked in and it's kind of sent back to validation. So if I send the correct email, that should go to the desktop of my machine, so we can test that. And so hopefully we've got an email saying that I'm successful, and that's the kind of a successful workflow. And we'll just go and prove that it works on the other side of things. And so there's our response. So there's our. So the demo wasn't perfect, but hopefully it kind of showcases how simple it is to start adding actions, and in a similar vein to how the content creation process happens. We've still got a bit of UX work to be done on it, but hopefully, as we kind of develop it, we can get it to the same level as the page creation stuff. So with the demo done. So, as a front-end developer, I've kind of been creeping my way into the Orchard C# code slowly over the last 2 to 3 years. And so I'm not as confident as Nick when it comes to Orchard. But having started at Buzz, I've really enjoyed working with Orchard and kind of getting to grips with the code base. I did my first commit to the code base a couple of months ago with the image ordering stuff. But my understanding of the back end isn't quite as strong as Nick, so you'll have to excuse me if there's bits that I haven't locked in perfectly. But I wanted to talk to you about how you add inputs and actions. So we use migrations for creating the content types. It's just easier, you get type safety and things. And then we've created a handler for each of the inputs that is selected by the form process task as it moves through. And that uses a processing form data, which actually isn't used that much. The processing form data action or method, it's really there for things that like file upload and things like that. Areas where you've got to do something before the validation can happen. And then we've got a validating form validation method in the handler. So that takes care of loading all the kind of custom settings per field. And then we usually need an admin editing view just to allow the user to add custom settings such as maximum and minimum, which I actually forgot to showcase in the demo, but you can actually set the maximum number or minimum number in the numeric field and that sort of thing. So I should present. Sorry. No, that's the wrong one. That's better. You can actually read it. And so when it comes to our migrations, my process generally is that to build the content type in the admin, export it as a recipe, use AI to create the migration, and then put it in the module. That's one of the tasks where I found AI really useful, is going in and converting lots and lots of recipe stuff into migration, so you get the type safety and things. You can see that we've got the form field input part. These are all parts that we've got in our module. The form field input part links to a list of various parts and makes sure that the editor that is viewed is the right editor for that particular input field. Then we've got the form field label, which is the display info for the content type. And then we've got form field parts, which is the required flags and other types of mapping. And the last one makes sure that the right icon is displaying when you see the big picker for the input field. So that's how you make sure that you have the right icon there. The base class that we're using, they're pretty simple. We try to keep it as simple as possible. So you've got the editor shape name, then you've got the process async, validate async, and the rest is to do with sort of admin integration and custom settings, so making sure you get the views for those. And this is how the number field works. It's kind of a game of two halves. It's not super complicated. The first part is about just retrieving all the values that you need in order to validate. So getting all the settings, custom settings, any required. And the second part is just about specific validation for that particular input. At the top, you'll see that there's nothing in the process async because this doesn't really need to do anything. I'm not going to say much about this, but this is just to show you that if you override the editor view, there is a default one that does the main defaults, placeholders, and helper text. But if you do override that, you then have to add them again. But you get this extra availability of the custom settings at the bottom there. So in the number field, you can see that we're setting the max and the min. And then lastly, we've got how we actually display the UI in the form. So, I think probably what Sebastian said about the using shapes here probably still applies. We've got a base form field input because most of the inputs are just standard form inputs with a different type. So in this particular example, we pull all the various settings out, and then we display the form, passing in all of the attributes. So this is the base template for our views. This is where we kind of the engine for building any inputs. Here's where you can do a lot of the styling stuff as well if you want, using Tailwind. So those 4 or 5 files, they're everything you need in order to create a new input. And they're really quick to make, so it means that there's one part. Also, you have to register your handler, and also you have to add the handler or the input type to a list of input types to appear in the drop-down. So there's an extra 2 steps of registering this, but it kind of it's very simple. It's one of those things where once you've done 1 or 2 inputs, you can kind of get the process and just kind of create lots more. Lastly, and in a much simpler step, is to creating an action. So again, the actions are built on 3 files. You've got the migration to create a content type, a custom service to create any of the integrations such as HubSpot and things. And then you've got your action handler, which is selected in that loop. In the workflow, the workflow has a process actions loop, which this handler gets picked up on. There's really not much to say about this in terms of the migration. We've just got a part that adds the conditional stuff, and The important thing here is that the stereotype form notification is the thing that's picking it up in the drop down for the actions. A single process async for base class. And this really, this just kind of shows the flow for making, adding an action handler. Again, a super simple process. Really all it's doing is a gateway to the HubSpot integration service and creating a contact from the form values that it pulls out. And those are the two things that I think make this a powerful approach. So being able to extend both the inputs and the actions. But I think once the UX tweaks have happened, I think it's going to be a lot simpler for our users to create forms without us and modify them. So future improvements are definitely, in order for this to be powerful, we need loads more actions, and I think the inputs are fine. I think the response stuff that we have, the three options, as I said previously, I think that those responses should probably be removed, and the responses should become a subcategory of action. The form field name helper is something I feel like I need in my everyday life. I'm forever getting the liquid markup wrong to getting data out of the object. So I really want that to be something a little bit more global. And one of the other things that I'm concerned about is the fact that this is duplication, in that with workflows there's tasks, and with this we've got actions, and there could be like, we're developing, we need to like duplicate the development. So I'd like to kind of find a closer, tighter way of bringing those together so that you only have to code once and it can be used in both. I don't know if that's a simple wrapper or something. But, so yeah, so that's where we're at with this. It is it's kind of one of those things that we've targeted next as the things to try and improve. And I think we've got some work to do. But if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
This is also something that I think it could create as a contribution to Watches Core, at least partially. Just a small suggestion for the conditions. Perhaps having an open JavaScript one there would be useful.
So you can create one on the fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's all. Yeah.
And also something that you also mentioned, the overlaps. So you touched on that, but have you actually come up with something to reduce those overlaps? Like we have verbal tasks, there are actions or forms, something that can be reused there?
Yeah, not yet. It's something I'm really conscious of because it seems like a waste to end up duplicating that sort of thing. But it's definitely something I need more time to kind of work on and sit down and find an approach to.
All right, thank you.
Anyone? Other questions? Comments? Okay, thank you very much.